But you got some feelings today, bro. What's going on?
The beautiful thing about getting lost, McKenzie, is when you are lost, there's something on the other side, which is called being found. So um, I just made an investment, and I think any times there is some sort of investment or a scary decision that has to be made, I end up getting very sweaty palms and a very tight
Just tell them like you
gluteus
told us.
maximus. Yeah, a tight butt region. And some people call that buyer's remorse, but I just upgraded my camera rig to the Sony FX3.
Wow.
Yeah. Big plays there. Uh,
Wow.
and the audience is you may be remorsing, but the audience is rejoicing. And there's a reason those words are so close together, Flea.
Right, you are, sir.
Yeah.
Right, you are.
Bro, we're here for you though. I know that. I mean, that is such a real thing. Just the kind of weird body feels after making a significant purchase with money that, um, just depending on where we're at financially, sometimes we don't always have.
Yeah, it's a sensation that you're like, whoa, okay, this just happened. I just did this, and um, yeah, so we're gonna have to see as to whether or not it meets expectations after heaps of research and heaps of kind of going down this rabbit hole of whether it's the move, whether it's not the move.
Fletch, I also think there's something else we need to address before we get into the topic of the day.
It's hiding.
Any reason you have an Owen Wilson shirt that says "Wow" on it?
Dude, you're one of the first people to get it straight off the bat because that is how he says it. If you go look at it, it is
Wow.
wow. Wow. It's a very
Which,
nasally wow. No, I saw this shirt. I'll zoom out just a little bit so you can see it. You may not be able to hear me too well, but I saw it, and the first thing I thought of when I saw this shirt is wow. I cannot believe someone would put that on a shirt. And I cannot tell you, every time I wear it, someone will come up to me and they won't say much, but they'll just say, wow. Because it's almost like a cult of Owen Wilson fanatics know that he has become very wealthy from saying the word wow. In fact, if you do the research, Owen Wilson has accumulated $135,000 from just saying the word wow in motion pictures.
Per
bro,
wow or wows in total?
Wows in total.
because
Gotcha.
honestly, I remember having this conversation with you years ago, Fletch. This was like something for whatever reason you've been studying for a little while now. Owen Wilson and his wows. So I'm so glad you found a shirt to finally pull it together.
So Owen, if you're listening, we'd love to have you on the pod. Fletch would be a fangirl for an entire hour.
And talk about a dude who always somehow gets in his feelings in about 90% of the movie. It's like watching Owen Wilson unravel and then figure out how to kind of navigate that.
I think my favorite Owen Wilson quote would have to be when he refers to Ben Stiller in Night in the Museum as Gigantor.
I kind of forgot he
Yeah,
was in that
I
movie.
feel, I mean, his come up slash like the fact that he's been able to have such a cool career with his brother is something that I look up to.
I forget
Who's
he
his
had a
brother?
brother.
Yeah, I mean, if you put them side by side, you can actually tell. But
Who's his brother, Fletch?
Zach Wilson, quarterback. No, it's the come on now. It's
Rainn
the other
Wilson?
Wilson. Huh?
Rainn Wilson from The
Mm-mm.
Yes. Yeah. Cousin Rain.
Okay. We gotta reel it in here because we got a lot to talk about.
His
All right,
name's
I gotta check in though. We
Yeah,
had a
Kels,
lot
what's
on.
going on?
Yeah, so this morning, bit flooded with emotions because you know my wife and I rent this house and it has a hot tub on it, and so today was the day that I was going to drain the hot tub and refill it. Well, I'm taking buckets, dumping out stuff on the hot tub, draining it, and just having a ball. Got my like normal clothes on and everything, and then I realized very quickly I hear like a humming and like, oh no, what's about to happen? And then the jets, now that the water's half empty, the jets start just shooting out water and it just nails me right. I like stood right in the line of fire.
Oh my
And
goodness.
come to realize I forgot to turn off the hot tub. So it was like, oh, it's draining and the temperature's dropping. Let me heat it back up. So the jets kicked in and I didn't realize it until it was pretty amusing.
I bet you Henry was behind all this. Henry, were you?
I would have loved to have been the bird in the tree watching this. That's for sure.
Oh gosh. You just imagine me like cursing up a storm, throwing a bucket.
You don't curse, McKenzie.
No, never.
No, come
Um,
on.
but
You're better
yeah.
than that. Wow. Well, that's fun. I it's been less dramatic on this end today, but I have been dealing with some serious car troubles lately. I've maybe shared with you guys a little bit, but my car broke down on the way to a wedding in a Chick-fil-A drive-through, and like peak rush hour. I'm talking like the amount of soccer moms and just Chick-fil-A lovers that were behind me that could not get to the window because my car broke down in the middle of the drive-through.
So you're telling me you couldn't get it to move?
Uh, wow, that's a good one. Couldn't get it to move, and eventually we get it out of gear and keep and like get it out of the drive-through. So they're back to the my pleasure-ness of forgiving us, and then the car like kicks off again. So long story short, we end up having to get it towed, having to Uber to a rental car, take a rental car to the wedding. It's still not ready when I'm coming back from the wedding. It's an hour and a half from where I live in Charlotte. And I'm told it's ready. So I drive all the way back to Columbia, drop off the rental car, and then I go to get in the car and it just doesn't work. Like the exact same problems are still going on. And so now I'm like stranded in Columbia, no way of driving my car back. Remarkably, we finally get it to turn on. And at any point, I'm like, this car could turn off, but I had no choice. I wasn't going to sleep in Columbia. In fact, I've heard someone say that if heaven lives above Jerusalem, then hell resides below Columbia, South Carolina. Like it is just not a place you want to be. Yeah. Spicy. Sorry for any Colombians out there.
Yeah,
Dude. Wow. We've had a lot of memories in that truck.
We have. It's in a great truck, and I'm still confused what had happened. But long story short, I end up being able to get it back home, and then I've just kind of been borrowing my brother's cars for the last few days, not driving my car so I could bring it to the dealership today. This morning, I'm like gearing up to bring it to the dealership, and it just flips on, and it's just working perfectly.
Wow.
I've had no problem since. I mean, it was obviously a blessing, but I'm just so confused. This car that just wasn't working 2 days ago is now all of a sudden working. So I'm not complaining. So yeah, it's been a pretty good morning on this end.
Also, for those of you listening, we have a picture showed up of the truck kind of in maintenance mode. That Chick-fil-A has a massive play place at the storefront. That's pretty insane. I've never seen a Chick-fil-A with like a playground on it.
Well, obviously
Remarkably,
it used to be a McDonald's, and then Chick-fil-A came in.
Now it's a Chick-fil-Play.
that's that's probably true. And that was the joke. That was the joke I used at least 15 times at the wedding. Was it definitely could have been worse. It could have been McDonald's, or it could have been
That's true.
Wendy's.
That's true.
Um,
And
Wow.
why
landed every single time.
why was the flag half a mast in the photo?
Could it be because of like Israel and Gaza?
Probably.
There's a lot of reasons it could be
yeah.
half-mast. That's
I
a
feel
whole
like,
other.
yeah. I feel like flags have been in half mast since COVID. Like there's always a reason to have it in half mast. It's very rare to see a flag fully waving now.
In fact, that's always confused me. Like this, it's kind of like a gray zone of like, do we put it at half-mast? Like, was that enough people that died? Like, was that sad enough? It's like a little bit. I'm not sure how
Well,
I feel about the mass culture.
I believe the government, like the president or something, is supposed to sign like an order that declares like flags be at half mast for like a certain period of time. But I think
So,
people do it by choice now, and so I think that's probably what's happening. But that's like uneducated assumption there, you know.
yeah, I mean, it's just unfortunately there's always tragedy happening. So you kind of just want to always fly it high for all people out there. But maybe that's just me.
I think they saw your car break down and they were like, "Well,
This is
let's get
trash.
it. let's lower it." let's.
Oh.
Well, HG, it does sound like, I don't know if it's a like a temporary thing or really what's going on with your vehicle, but it does sound like the truck has feelings. And so I would just ask that on the truck's behalf that you really start to honor those feelings, um, and really pay attention to what you're feeding the truck, because I think that
Mm.
kind of segues into the topic of discussion today as to what we're putting in our body. And we're not talking about food today. We're talking about liquid, and specifically, we're talking about alcoholic beverages.
Blame it on the alcohol. Yeah,
A
I'm
lot of
excited
people
to talk
do.
about
A
this
lot of
one
people do,
because
man.
I honestly feel like every person listening to this podcast, us included, has an alcohol story. Like something that comes up around alcohol, at least one, others countless dozens, in which someone or something someone did something or something happened that can probably be traced back to saying, wow, this would not have happened if it weren't for alcohol. I know I certainly have one of those stories. But I'm curious for you guys, where do we want to start in this conversation? Maybe by acknowledging how big the conversation is, how we're not going to be able to get to everything. Um, and we talked before this and really want to focus in on kind of the social emotional aspects of alcohol, and how that's playing into your life, and maybe some helpful ways to think about our relationship with alcohol and how we can continue to refine it and challenge this conversation, so we can be healthier, more integrated men.
Yeah, so
Fletch?
we're not scientists. We're not
Yeah.
gonna try to throw any shade your way on your habits. You know your own habits. You know the way in which you should or shouldn't be treating your body. Um, yeah, I think the purpose of this conversation is to shed some light and maybe prompt some new ways of thinking, um, and to share a little bit about our experience, and hopefully it can you can use that experience to better your life.
So
Yes.
let's start
So
there.
HD, let's start there. I'll take
Ah,
I'll take it
I was
here
about
and
to
ask the
say, why
first
don't you tell
question.
us?
Why don't you share with us your journey with alcohol, where that's led, where you are now with it, and kind of give us a little backstory with you. Because for those of you who don't know, Henry talks a little bit about his story in Blue Marble Sky, but why don't you kind of give it a little more detail, a little more context?
Maybe you guys can relate to this. Growing up, alcohol is very normalized. It's kind of something that I always looked forward to. to some degree growing up. Like, oh, I look forward to being able to, kind of be one with the adults and have a drink. But I think as I get near drinking age, I started to notice I have an amazing mother in so many regards, and she's had a pretty tumultuous journey with alcohol herself. And um, it was just something I noticed honestly from a young age. I remember asking my dad, like, why does mom get like that when she drinks the red juice? That there was something I knew even from a young age that this substance has an ability to impact who someone is. And that was just kind of mind blowing to me. My mom had some experiences with rehabilitation and trying to get sober, which actually led me at a pretty young age. I want to say I was 14 to go to a rehab center and take a week-long class on alcohol, which was really kind of alarming at that point in my life. I'm not sure I was ready to process all that information. But I do remember thinking like, wow, this isn't some small thing. I need to be really careful around this, especially because some of this can be genetic. Um, and so when it came time to drink, I remember I waited longer than any of my friends. I was committed to not drinking first year in high school. And then when I started drinking, like just trying to do my best to be responsible, and pretty clearly it was prevalent to me that there was certain people around me that had this predisposition to just not drinking normal. Like they couldn't stop. There was something with certain friends of mine that I noticed even in ninth, 10th grade of high school, where I was like, wow, this person really reacts strongly to this thing. And I never really felt like that was me. So it kind of gave me an opportunity to just reason it away. Okay, I'm not an alcoholic, so I'll just drink. I can get away with this. And of course I looked forward to college because that's the time in my life as I saw it where let loose, get the Kirkland vodka, pour it down the throat or the drain if they catch you, which that did happen. But in college, that was just the thing, right? And when I decided, kind of just against my better judgment, to join a fraternity my freshman year of college, um, same fraternity that Fletch was in, and we met our first day of college. And I actually remember Fletch was playing football, so he couldn't really drink, so he would find alternate ways to alter his mind, and I would drink, and it just kind of was normalized. Once again, it was like drinking water at night. And one of the things that I had to do as a pledge in this fraternity was I had to become like what they called the bead pledge. So during Mardi Gras in New Orleans, that they would stack beads on my head and just kind of pour alcohol down my throat, and that was part of what was just normal in this fraternity culture. Something happened that night. Still to this day, I'm not exactly sure what, but somewhere along the way, whoever was supposed to be looking after me lost me, and I woke up the next morning in a hospital an hour away without my phone, no wallet, no one around me, no idea how I got there. My stomach had been pumped, and I've never been more terrified and just confused. And I didn't know how to get home. I didn't know how I got there, and I certainly didn't understand why I was alone. Um, that experience for me really started the journey that maybe has led me to wanting to make this podcast. Became such a catalyzing moment, both for me personally and forcing me to question a lot of the things I was doing, the person I was becoming. But it's also something I've reflected a lot back on when it comes to this alcohol conversation, and this binge drinking culture, and um, perhaps just a conversation that I know we've discussed how it just doesn't get confronted. And there's a lot of money that's being funneled into making sure that we don't have the conversation that's being had on this podcast right now. And I know that it continues to be a journey for me to figure out what does a healthy relationship look like with alcohol. Um, and that experience to me is something I can now look back on with gratitude, because it did change what I thought about alcohol, the way that I drink it. Um, and it was incredibly painful and something that I wouldn't wish upon anyone.
No, dude, that's vulnerable, man. That's really vulnerable. And I think there's so much to unpack there, and one of the things that I'd want to unpack is just we talk about vulnerability, but I think being in it is different. So a gentleman's tip of the hat to you for sharing um, your story in that regard. And then I think I want to dig just a little bit deeper and kind of entertain the thoughts of what, going back and looking at that story now, what do you feel like you've learned? Like, how has Henry changed?
That I look back on and I'm like, wow, I started to question that at that point. Like, there's something here when it comes to friendships rooted in alcohol versus true brotherhood and friendship apart from this substance, or at least where it's not so prevalent and important. And that's something I think that a big takeaway from this experience for me was it challenged me to really sit back and think like who do I want to be, and who are the people that make me more like that person, and that align to that person that I want to be. And it challenged my friendships and my relationships in a lot of ways, which is why you know it became less about quantity and more about quality, less about the mixer on Friday night and more about the workout Wednesday afternoon. It just kind of shifted my priorities and especially the way that I wanted to connect with people. Because once alcohol has a big impact in some area, whether it's someone that you love or on, like in my case, on an experience that I had, it's hard for it to not like almost be in neon lights. Anytime I see it, uh, I started to see it differently. Like, wow, that thing almost killed me.
Mm.
That thing actually almost took my life. And in fact, it takes more lives than anything else in this entire country. And no one's talking about it. There's nothing else that takes that many lives and has such little conversation around. And that's hard for me to wrestle with, and why this conversation goes from being lighthearted and funny to being really serious, because we're talking about people's lives, and we're talking about people's brains and the the continuation of their health and their relationships and things that, like, it can just rip lives apart. And I know you guys have seen that too, and so I know that I can get impassioned talking about it because I mean, without that experience, I'm not sure I would have confronted a lot of this, but I'm sure that it would have happened in another way.
Mm.
And I think if I look at my drinking at that time, there's just no doubt it wasn't sustainable. And I'm sure there's people that you guys, both audience and Fletch and McKenzie, that you can think about who in your life, you're like, wow, that's not sustainable. And do you have to hit a rock bottom in order to wake up to realize, oh my gosh, what am I putting in my body? What am I doing right now? Like, I I'm glad the rock bottom happened, but I really hope that this something like this podcast can prompt someone to say, I don't want to hit the rock bottom. I don't want to wake up in the hospital before I have to actually question why I'm drinking and start to do the work to understand and get to the root of what I'm really experiencing and really feeling that's making me turn to alcohol.
I've got a question for both of you. I was never in a fraternity.
Of
So
course.
I've got a question for you guys. Um, what was the conversation around alcohol with your friends like? Because, you know, I think, especially with younger guys that I've witnessed and I've worked with, it really seems like the conversation is revolved around like proving to each other how ridiculous you can get because you drank a ridiculous amount of alcohol. And I've got some stuff I want to cite after this element of conversation, but I'm really curious for you guys. What was those conversations amongst your friends when you guys first started binge drinking in college?
A lot of it, when I go back into that period of my life and that chapter, was revolved around, who's getting the alcohol, number one, like who's getting the handle. And um, then it becomes formulating different games around kind of who can drink the most. And then the person who could drink the most, they're considered a quote unquote tank. And if you're a tank, you get more praise, right? That is just the nature of, you can think about someone in your friend group who almost ties his identity to around being able to drink a lot and survive. Um, there was always this, I don't know, this nature of putting like it on a pedestal, right? Alcohol became this thing that it's not, oh, let's go do this activity. No, let's go get alcohol and then we'll figure out the activity after. It was, we couldn't do the activity without having alcohol as
Mhm.
this crutch, right? We can't just go and enjoy this. It always has to be there. Um, Obviously, playing a sport, you literally, like, physically cannot drink. I mean, you could, but I mean, I remember one time I was doing both in a fraternity and playing football, and I showed up to early morning workouts after a long night in I don't know if it was a party or just pledging, and I was just profusely sweating out vodka. And the strength and conditioning coach comes up to me and just starts ripping into me. And he is just like saying it so the whole room could hear, because you could just smell me from a mile away. And it was one of the most embarrassing moments of my life, because here I am just trying to prove myself on a team, and I'm just sitting there uh, in a squat position, struggling, and this coach is yelling in my ear because he smells vodka all over me. Maybe it wasn't vodka, maybe it was tequila, because vodka doesn't have as intense smell, but tequila does.
You've always been a
um
tequila guy too, Fletch. So
Probably so. um but yeah, I guess for me, Mackenzie, it's really just like the pedestal that I can remember it always being put on, and um that being such like this factor that people
mm.
around me had a hard time um, kind of going through their nights or weekends without being very attached to.
Yeah. HD, what about you?
Yeah, I was just kind of drawn back in your question to, was never very involved in the fraternity, but I remember sitting in those, like a rush when we were kind of selecting our next pledges, and the way that they would be talked about, it was like exactly what Fletcher, was saying, that this guy can drink so much. This guy took down an entire handle and was like beasting it. It's like everything is in context to how much they can drink. And it's, I do like to sometimes just separate the thing from the reason. And, we talked about this last podcast. I think a lot of people have different reasons for drinking. And sometimes depression can lead people to drink, and sometimes drinking can lead to more depression. And I know that's something I saw a lot in college, was people struggling with school, overwhelmed, and or depressed, and then turning to alcohol to kind of help fill that void or help give a moment of relief from that anxiety and the depression. And the truth is, it completely freezes your dopamine. Like, it's going to affect your ability to feel happy the next day, or like to actually get out of this depression. And so it is really, it's manipulating, because it seems like it's helping. And it was definitely me in moments. Like, it seemed like it was helping, but with the benefit of hindsight, I can look back and know, wow, it was actually doing such the opposite. Um, and I think in college, because it's such a stressful environment, um, one of the first things I heard at Tulane was, we work hard, we play hard. That there's this acknowledgement, if you put in the work, and that doesn't end in college, because it's the same idea. Wow, I really need a drink. That same mentality of somehow working and earning means the reward is alcohol. And we've created alcohol as this reward, which is amazing marketing on behalf of the alcohol companies. If you want to have a big moment, a triumphant moment, a champion moment, your high life, you need a beer in your hand, or you need that drink. And that's what I saw so much in college was, this is your trophy, good work, and here you go. Run off, right? But I think we can now look back and know that, unfortunately, it's a pretty unhelpful trophy.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me what you were saying there about being lonely because you drink and drink because you're lonely. There's a Chris Stapleton song called Whiskey and You, and in it he has that lyric which is, I drink because I'm lonesome, and I'm lonesome because I drink. And I think that's such a interesting parallel, which is it fuels that endless cycle.
And I think so many times we forget that what you're doing in that period of your life, you're talking about college, right, is you're formulating habits, right? And so you don't think too much about it when you're in it, because you're in it and that's your life, right? But when you do it on repeat, then you leave the college environment, and then that is a part of who you are. And it's really hard to jump outside, because then for the most part, a lot of your friends are going to be in the same boat and craving and wanting the same thing. And a lot of those relationships have this common characteristic of indulging in a certain way. And I'd like to say right now, I am no more better, or like, it's like a better than anyone, in the sense that I look down on anyone who drinks, because I was an absolute fool in high school, and I was an absolute fool in college. Um, and a lot of that tomfoolery and debauchery is who I was. But that is something that is, yeah, it's not any, I don't have a lot of shame or guilt around it. It's just a what I thought I needed to be, or my craving to belong with a group of friends and a group of guys.
And I'm curious to dig into that a little more, Fletch, because I think about what would I have felt if I was in college listening to this podcast right now. For one, I think uh, I would have written off any problem I have, because I was comparing to the people around me. And a lot of times we form our friend groups based on how much we drink or the substances we use. Like, I can think that was like-minded with them, or use words like that. But the truth is, did you like to drink a similar way that I like to drink, is often how friendships are formed, especially in college. And there was this sense that I felt, even if I could have acknowledged, yeah, I'm drinking more than I would drink after college, but this is my time to get it out. This is when I need to get it out of my system. And that is a narrative that I'm curious to dig into a little bit. Like, what is that? And what would you say to someone who's like, well, this is the time that I need to get it out of my system. Like, I get it. Like, the conversation, yeah, alcohol is bad. Like, I'll stop after college, but I need to get it out of my system right now.
Yeah. I think that starts with like, what are relationships constructed in, which is what you were touching on, right? And to me, I think it's, especially young men conflate ambition with compassion, right? So the sense of, I can connect with people if we can prove to each other that we can connect with each other. And so alcohol is that that passage, is that way to like be able to connect with other people in college, because by the time I reached college, I didn't drink any longer. And it was extremely difficult to build relationships with people who were in college who were abusing alcohol. And it's amazing to me how many of my friends who I had in college, who I have become their sole sober friend. And I feel obligated to help them navigate getting off of alcohol after college. And every time I hang up the phone in one of those conversations, it infuriates me that if they didn't have me, like there's no one else in their network who they feel like they could talk about with alcohol, because no one else has the same determination to never again put another drop of alcohol in their system. And so like, to answer your question, I think it's rooted in this sense of ambition, being able to prove to one another that you can be a part of the club, you can be a part of the group. And I think that's kind of the real detriment to how men build relationships outside of college, after college as well, because they've rooted their whole ability in making friendships with competition and with ambition, rather than with compassion and connecting and vulnerability.
Hmm.
McKenzie, would you back up and I want to hear Fletch's thoughts on this too, but will you back up and tell us what your relationship is with alcohol and that idea of even being motivated to stop? I think you have a really interesting story as it relates to alcohol and kind of a unique path you've taken.
Yeah. Alcohol has, in terms of my own personal life, was a very short stint, extremely short stint. Within under a year, I started drinking alcohol. I stopped. Um, Growing up, I had a very similar situation that you had, Henry, which was I would see people around me drink and I wouldn't like who they were when they were drunk. And it bothered me a lot, because uh, it was time and time again proved that in my life that when people start drinking in my life, they become a different person and someone I can't connect with anymore. And so it caused me to have a really lonely high school experience, in which I finally caved and drank with some friends and regretted it ever since. Um, uh, and so, I resorted to having friends that were girls in high school, because all of my guy friends that I made growing up started drinking alcohol, started using drugs, and I no longer fit in with how they connect with each other. And so then that turned into people in my high school accusing or rumoring that I was gay or homosexual or bisexual or something, because I had a lot of girlfriends, but I didn't have a lot of guy friends. And whenever that came back to me, that really hurt, because I blamed specifically alcohol for it. And because I was unable or unwilling to drink with my friends anymore, that led me down a trail that caused me to be considered gay amongst my friends who I grew up with. And so um, that really bothered me. And I think I grew kind of a resentment of alcohol because of it. And then in college, having that happen kind of again, where I had a lot of friends who drank and I didn't drink. And when they found that out, I kind of had to move friend groups because of it to a group that was more accepting. Um, After college, I've started really diving into this men's work. And um, it is my root passion, my root motivator for why I am dedicated in helping men. I think all of us in our communities, mutual communities, have had people negatively affected by alcohol, which have led to attempted suicides, which have led to drunk driving, which has led to death. And every time I get a call from someone and who tells me that this person in my life has died because of an accident, or because of an overdose, or because of a drinking problem, um, it I get angry, and I get angry because um, I feel like when I would get that call and I didn't know what to do, that was the most helpless, weak feeling I've ever felt in my life, of just like, how do I help my friends going through this now, of dealing with a friend's death, dealing with a friend's overdose. Um, and I hated that. And so every time I get that call, it's more motivation for me to try to find these tools that men can have specifically, in which, when they're willing to change and they're ready to change and change their ways, um, I'm there for them and I'm ready for them. But just like you, Fletch, I'm not going to judge someone for doing something that is socially encouraged by other people. Um, and uh, because, who am I to be on that pedestal of grandeur? But when you see your friends, you know, have that pedestal of grandeur for who can drink the most, who can vomit, who can black out, it I leave those nights like feeling really upset and sad for my friends, and just always trying to be willing to help them when they've come to me and they're like, I want to change. I'm ready to change, which has happened a couple times. Thank the Lord. Um, but people are toying with some serious health and emotional problems that come from alcohol. So that's my tangent on my background on it.
I think one of the most impressive things, though, is your your will behind it, though, McKenzie, because I think people a lot of times will say, "Hey, I'm not drinking," and but it's what's behind those words that matter, right? And I think your actions have always displayed um, the synchronization with your words of that's just not something you're interested in and not something that you want to take part in because of the way it's impacted you and shaped your worldview. So
Yeah.
I've got to like bear witness to it on in like a very real sense.
There was one time a couple years ago, I went to a wedding in Mexico. And if, for those of you who don't know Mexico, like Mexican weddings are very rooted in alcohol. It's pretty crazy how these weddings can go. I mean, HD, you just went to a Mexican wedding as well. It can get pretty rowdy.
Well, unlike American weddings where you have to wait in line at the bar, in Mexican weddings they just bring you drinks if you don't even have to ask. It's like
Yeah.
shots, tequila, this, just like brought to you constantly.
And yeah, and when I went to this wedding, of course I didn't drink, and the waiters were kind of first off, they were getting offended that I wasn't drinking. I kept on asking for glasses of water, and their shoulders would drop and be like, "Really? Like that's it? That's all you want?" And then secondly, the other guests were refused to accept it, like refused to accept the fact that I was sober. And they're like, "This is your night. Like you can do it." I was like, "No, guys, I don't drink. I don't drink." And so then I eventually, when they had a drink in hand and were trying to force it down my throat, I eventually said, "No, no, no, it's against my religious beliefs. I'm Mormon." And I lied. I'm not Mormon. And so when some of these friends came to my wedding, they were expecting a Mormon wedding because they all heard that I was Mormon and that's why I didn't drink. And so I had to explain to them, no, it was because like those other friends in that group were forcing me to drink and I don't drink. And rather than them just accepting it, I had to lie and say it was a religious belief for them to believe me and to stop bugging me about it. And so,
So you just conveniently converted for the day.
I had to. I mean, it was either that or fall on the sword of my beliefs and my and and everything that I've worked towards not having alcohol a part of my life, right? And it's not a part of my life anymore personally. Unfortunately, it's something that haunts me because I have countless friends who struggle with it and who struggle to socialize with it and who struggle to get off of it, that I have to have this conversation almost on a weekly basis with people. And
Mm.
it's infuriating that that's the case.
Mhm.
Um, because that culture of trying to force alcohol down people's throats is not just the Mexican culture. I've had that happen in countless bars here in the United States, in college, after college, all the time. It is an anomaly when I say, no, 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 I'm just going to have water. I don't drink. Um, and some people accept it and like are okay with it. And then there are people who are like, no, no, that's ridiculous, and start fighting me over my beliefs. And I think that's so backwards in 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 trying to connect with someone,
Yeah.
and it's infuriating.
Man, I can only imagine. That's exhausting. It's like, can no not be a complete sentence? And I think I probably take the more cop out approach where I'll order a beer and drink a fourth of it and throw it away at the end of the night just to hold it and not have to answer the question. Because I have experienced that in a way less than you have, I know. But there's nothing else that we have to defend ourselves against, like alcohol, when we choose not to drink, which once again is great for the alcohol companies because there's a cultural pressure that if you want to be in these spaces, ante up, be ready to drink.
Yep.
And I think some of it too roots in the fact that this isn't breaking news. Everyone on this podcast knows alcohol is not good for our health. So there's some level of shame that we're walking around with. It could be super small when it comes to alcohol, but there's nothing worse than doing something that you know you probably shouldn't be doing. And then someone else comes in and is not doing that thing, which shines a big spotlight on what you're doing. And so I think some of it is that personal reckoning that happens when I'm in the bar getting wasted and Mackenzie's like, no, I don't drink. It's like,
Oh,
dang.
and I have had people come up to me and I say, no, I don't drink, when they give me a drink. And the first thing they say, literally, and this has happened more than once with friends, why? You think you're better than all of us? No, I don't. Actually, I think I'm too weak to handle alcohol, and therefore, if anything, I think I'm less socially equal than you because I can't handle it the way you can handle it. And or the way you believe you can handle it. And so it has damaged a lot of relationships in my life, but also it has led to me leaning into other relationships outside of the friends that I have who rely on alcohol in social settings, right? Like the friendship we have is not at all rooted in alcohol. And I've grown a lot of other friendships that are not rooted in alcohol. And when I say that the friendships are completely different in their backbone, in their structure, in their ability to have other conversations besides surface level conversations, I have realized I cannot have a social conversation with someone who's drinking a beer and have it go as deep as I'd like it to go, or have it be as meaningful as I'd like it to be, because uh, there, a lot of times I have people who come up to me and want to have a meaningful conversation, but they're just gone, and we sit there and talk for 30 minutes, and then the next morning they don't remember a single thing about that conversation.
See, that's something that's really interesting to me is the ways in which alcohol will open someone up and a lot of times create this space for someone to feel like they can just share everything and word vomit all their problems and emotions out. But it's almost done in this falsified way in which sometimes, like you were saying, they don't even remember it, or it's not coming from this healthy way of going about it. So therefore it just comes out in this like chunky vomit. And I don't know, then they formulate this relationship with alcohol that in order to get there, right, in order to get to that place where they're vulnerable, then they need alcohol as like a gateway to then get to that place. So then they formulate this memory around, oh, in order to be vulnerable and share, what's actually on my heart, then I need to have a couple sips of this drink.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a great quote from an author named Michael Kimmel who wrote this book called Guyland, and he says, "Drinking to excess is the lubricant of intentions. And I think
True.
that's kind of what you touched on, which is like this excess drinking can lead me to do the things that I want to do rather than the things that I feel like I'm unable to do when I'm sober. How many people are like, oh, let me get a couple drinks in me before I text my girlfriend and have this uncomfortable conversation? How many people like wait to get drunk to have a fight with their partner? Like, how many people get drunk in order to tell their friend how they truly feel? It's
Mm.
the lubricant of intention, but the issue is you eventually make that the primary tool for those intentions. And once
Yeah.
you do that, you cannot function socially with other people without it. And
Mm.
it's sneaky like that. And it's horrible.
I think that's why so many entertainers like will struggle so many times with alcohol issues, is because they'll start off like, oh, I need a couple drinks before I go on stage, and next thing you know, they become alcoholics. And as much as we can all bash the media, I do think it's really cool how it's the script is changing with people coming out and talking about their sobriety, and that being something that is almost becoming a little bit more mainstream. Um, and if there's anyone I feel like who could sponsor this podcast, it would be Liquid Death, because they're like taking this approach of, you're about to say something, Henry.
Or Athletic Brewing. It's a not alcohol-free beer company.
Alcohol free beer.
Just to make sure
How does that
we're really
taste
getting it out there.
though? But I do feel like it's giving people an opportunity, especially in that space, to continually go down their path and not feel like they have to have the crutch of alcohol.
Yeah.
Right.
There's one thing that that we've touched on in this conversation, but I want to go back to and kind of um, have my parting thoughts be rooted in this, which is there is a culture of silence around alcohol. And by being a friend who witnesses another friend struggle with alcohol and not saying anything, in some ways you are allowing that culture to continue. And so, what I have done with myself is try to have an honest discussion with those friends in an appropriate setting with not any alcohol, uh, and try to raise my concerns of just how I personally feel when they're struggling with alcohol. And I've had a lot of great conversations because of that. A lot of friends are more open than you would think, um, coming from a non-judgmental stance. But we need to do better in erasing this cultural silence around binge drinking, around competitive drinking, around social drinking. And when you feel as though someone is struggling, it is your responsibility as a friend to acknowledge what you're concerned with and why you're concerned with it. And so I just want to leave it with that, because I think this culture of silence has led this conversation to be stomped on and vilified and ignored for generations. And I think if we create this culture of raising our voices to our friends when we see them struggling with alcohol, we can help slowly grow more awareness that social drinking uh, is not always a good thing, and in fact, many ways, it's a bad thing. And so, I just feel very very passionate about that.
Can you see what that says, Mackenzie? Or is it
Yeah,
backwards?
yeah. Go ahead and read it.
It says, I speak for those who have no voice. And I think that's what you're doing right now, is you're speaking for those who, it's not that they don't have a voice, they just haven't found it yet, or haven't had enough confidence or courage to speak it or find it. So thanks for sharing that, man. Because it does.
Mm.
Those aren't just words. There's a lot behind those words, and I think
Yeah.
you're challenging everyone who's listening to those words. You're calling them to an elevated state.
Yeah. And I want to speak to maybe the other audience member who either has been maybe not super honest with yourself about your drinking, or has identified a desire to quit or to slow down or to change your relationship to alcohol. And I want to first acknowledge that I know people, very close people, that if stopping doesn't feel like an option, that there is a sense of powerlessness over alcohol. Um, and that's a perfectly okay place to be. You're not alone, and there's amazing resources out there. Obviously, AA is one, but there's so many, and I encourage you to reach out, get help, lean on the people in your life. Everyone just wants to see you be healthy. And then to the person who maybe is in a little bit of, maybe this is me, maybe this isn't me, beginning to kick the tires on getting honest. What is my real relationship to alcohol? What does it feel like if I went to the bar on Friday night and I wasn't drinking? How would that experience be different than if I was? And what role is alcohol really playing in my social life, in my relationships? Kind of taking inventory of your life through the lens of alcohol is a really healthy thing and a really good place to check in for all of us. If we at all drink, even one drink a month, like check in with yourself. Where am I at with this? Because this marketing machine is more powerful than any of us realize. And the amount of money that is going in to normalizing this culture and silencing these conversations is so tremendous. There was a point in our country where this was the hot button issue politically. Should alcohol be legal or not? We're so far from that, but can we bring that same skepticism around this into our lives right now? Just a little healthy curiosity and skepticism around what we're being sold as normal. And I hope that in it we can find some discovery and replace whatever no comes out of that with an awesome yes. And that's something I know you've done a great job, Fletch. In my life, you're someone who's just always finding a way to replace a no with a new yes, whether that's a new hobby, new skill, new thing you're working on, new creative thing. Maybe you can speak to that. Like if someone chooses to say no to alcohol, what's something they can say yes to?
Tea, apple juice, kombucha, different ways to gather. I find that for me, like instead of, hey, let's go get a drink with another man who I want to connect with, hey, let's go grab coffee. We're still having face-to-face connection and still being able to meet and gather. It's just around something different. So just being a tad bit more intentional with the ways in which you're connecting to people. And like you said, kicking the tires. Like cold turkey is really hard for certain people, and that may not be available for you right now and how you're viewing your life. But starting to just see where you're at and move in a direction that is healthier, I think is kind of what you're talking about and what we're prompting.
Yeah, our journeys are continuing in this alongside so many other people. And so I just ask too that if anyone knows anyone or if anyone feels very passionate about this topic, has some credentials and would love to come on the pod to talk with us, we'd love to have more conversations about social drinking, binge drinking in college, and alcohol with anyone. And so this is something that I think we'll touch on several times throughout the pod. It is a topic that is rooted in almost everything in terms of men's issues and challenges they go through. So this is not the last time we'll have this conversation for sure.
No, I think it's just the beginning. Actually, you just took the top off the bottle right here in a lot of regards.
Sweet. Well, I appreciate it, dudes. Have a day. Thanks so much for listening, guys. I hope that was valuable and insightful. And before you go, do whatever you got to do today. I want to share something with you that I'm really excited about. On January 21st to 26th, we are hosting Peaceful Warrior, a men's wellness retreat to El Salvador. This is going to be an amazing group immersive experience, digging into a lot of these topics on what it means to be a man and a healthy man in the world today, a whole person. We're going to be moving, we're going to be eating well, we're going to be sharing a lot of meaningful experiences together. There's so much more to say about it, but go do your own research. You can find more at yournextretreat.com. Can't wait to see you guys there, and have a beautiful day. Peace and love.